After the death of Brandon Stark at the hands of Tyrion Lannister, Aegon VI was crowned the new king of the Six Kingdoms with the approval of the Hand of the King and House Lannister. But the fall of Brandon Stark marked a complete collapse of stability, and the new king had to clarify the end of the crippled king's reign to all his vassals. Aegon VI Targaryen's first decisions was to keep Tyrion Lannister as Hand of the King, due to the friendship that bound them. After that, the king called an emergency meeting of the small council. Remember, with the arrival of a new king, the councillors must either be reappointed or replaced by the new monarch. However, before Aegon could decide on such matters, he needed to know which houses would support him in this new era of the realm. Thus, seated at the council table were King Aegon VI, the Hand of the King Tyrion Lannister, Daario Naharis, and Grand Maester Samwell Tarly, who retained his post and swore loyalty to his dear friend. Absent were the Master of Coin, the Master of Laws, the Master of War, and the Master of Ships. All were on the road to the Reach with their armies to quell the rebellion, except for Davos Seaworth, the Master of Ships, who remained in Storm's End with his lord, Gendry Baratheon. Additionally, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Brienne of Tarth, was also absent following the loss of her king and awaited the decisions of the new ruler. With that, the meeting began, with a decision to announce the news to the people of the realm through a public and official coronation before the eyes of all citizens of King's Landing. The coronation was scheduled for the following day. The second point of order was to determine who stood with the new realm, and so ravens were sent to all vassals of the Six Kingdoms, to the rebels, and to the independent Kingdom of the North. Through this action, the new king would know whom he could trust, which houses would remain loyal, and which would rise up. Finally, seeing that Bronn had caused the Reach to be set ablaze, and that the houses loyal to the crown were on the brink of rebellion, Aegon decided to officially dismiss Bronn as Master of Coin and strip him of his title as Lord of the Reach, along with all his lands and honors. He sent ravens to all houses of the Reach, explaining Bronn's dismissal, and announced that once the war ended and peace returned to the realm, a new Lord of the Reach would be chosen from within the territory. Someone with at least a reputable name and holdings within the region. The meeting concluded with the decision to delay the selection of the new council members and Kingsguard. Meanwhile, Aegon named Daario Naharis the new commander of the Gold Cloaks and one of his generals for the coming wars, offering him an official seat on the small council. Ravens began to arrive, and the news of Brandon Stark's death and the rise of a new Targaryen king spread across the houses of Westeros. First, the houses of the Crownlands received the news with fear and indifference, for the new king was backed by House Lannister, an army from Essos, and a massive dragon. The wisest move was to bend the knee, and so all houses of the Crownlands sent ravens to King's Landing affirming their loyalty. Second, in the Stormlands, Gendry Baratheon and his loyal advisor Davos Seaworth received the news with disbelief. Davos believed Aegon was a good man and could be a great and just king, and tried to persuade Gendry not to rebel and to accept the new ruler. However, Gendry explained that his vassals would refuse, as he had been Robert Baratheon and the men of these very lands who had ended the Targaryen dynasty and ushered in a new era for Westeros. It would be nearly impossible to convince them to kneel before another Targaryen. Thus, Gendry summoned all the lords of the Stormlands to Storm's End to try to convince them, and Davos sent a raven to King's Landing, explaining that House Baratheon needed time to decide. Third, in Sunspear, Quentyn Martell learned of the events. As the son of Doran Martell, he had to look after his people and ensure peace. He believed the best option was to stay out of rebellion and accept the new king as legitimate. Fourth, the Ravens reached the military camp that the loyalist forces to Brandon had built near Ashford. These forces included House Tully with Edmure Tully, House Arryn with Jon Royce, and House Blackwater with Bronn, as well as various troops from the Crownlands. The message was received with dread, but Edmure Tully chose not to kneel, since Brandon was part of his family, and declared House Tully's rebellion. Jon Royce agreed with Lord Tully, but needed to consult with his liege, Robin Arryn. Thus, both House Tully and House Arryn's forces abandoned the camp and returned to their respective homelands. Bronn, upon receiving the news of his title being revoked, was abandoned by his vassals' troops. The entire army cast him out of the camp, and only about 20 knights remained by his side. Enraged, Bronn set out for King's Landing to clear things up and reclaim his privilege. Meanwhile, the rich houses loyal to the crown remained so, pleased with Aegon's decision about Bronn. Lastly, the news reached the rebels. House Hightower, Redwyne, Hewitt, and Greyjoy. Lord Lytton Hightower rejoiced at Brandon Stark's death and the arrival of a new king, who had delivered justice for the death of his son and fulfilled the purpose of the rebellion, removing Bronn and appointing a new native lord for the Reach. Thus, Lord Lytton Hightower and Lord Paxter Redwyne decided to end their revolt and negotiate directly with the new king of Westeros. They sent a raven to the king, explaining they would lay down arms if Aegon's proposals were upheld. Lord Lytton and Lord Paxter would travel personally to the capital to propose Lytton as the new lord of the Reach. They sent their armies home and, with a small escort, headed for the capital, also sending ravens to nearby houses to explain that the war was over. However, Victarion Greyjoy disagreed. He had another secret goal: to tame the King Dragon and claim the throne of Westeros. Now he had lost all his allies. Only one last hope remained: the Dragon Horn. Seeing the situation, he abandoned Highgarden with his troops and returned to the Iron Islands, awaiting the last Targaryen to face him. But he would be ready, with his secret weapon. He sent a raven to the king, declaring that his war continued and he would bow to no king. Finally, the news of Brandon Stark's death reached the north. Darin Homewood received it with sadness and fury, for a Lannister had slain a Stark. As he prepared to mobilize all northern troops, Sansa Stark appeared. The Queen in the north had survived the treacherous assassination attempt and was stunned by her brother's death. She was even more shocked to learn Tyrion had killed him and Aegon had taken the throne. She wanted to hear firsthand what had happened and decide the North's next steps. Sansa gathered her best men as her escort and set out for King's Landing. Meanwhile, Arya Stark continued sailing towards Bravos to uncover more about the attempt on her sister's life, unaware that her brother had perished. But for now, her path lay far from the political changes in Westeros. The next day, a public and official coronation was held in King's Landing. The new king was well received by the crowd, accompanied by Drogon and his confidants. Aegon was proclaimed Aegon VI, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar and the First Men, Lord of the Six Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. While the people cheered their new king and stood in awe and fear of the dragon, many began making their way to the capital to determine the realm's future.